Recently, Joe Rogan accused Canada of being subject to a communist takeover. Let's hear the.
Vancouver's one of the most beautiful
I don't go to
cities.
Canada anymore. But
Ever?
no,
You
fuck,
wouldn't do a gig
no,
there?
not while that guy's president. Fuck you.
Yeah,
or
but
whatever he is,
these
prime
people
minister.
are fans of yours. They want to see you still.
Fuck you. Get rid of that guy. I'll come back. I just don't trust any of it up there.
Yeah.
I just think they're so far into tyranny right now. Like the laws that they're passing, the shit that they're doing, the erosion of people's rights. Like I don't want to support it. I think it's fucking horrible.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people there just want to laugh. I think people need a laugh. You
Oh
know?
yeah, they definitely need a laugh.
Yeah.
They're in the middle of a full-blown communist takeover. Yeah, it's a scary spot.
Yeah.
It's scary, but it used to be amazing. I used to say that Canada's 20% less douchebags. Like the people are 20% nicer than most people that you meet in America.
They're
but
polite.
that's why they get roped into all this shit. That's why they get roped into hate speech laws because they want to be kind. They want to be good people. And they don't realize like compelled speech has a terrible ending. It always ends in communism because someone has to compel that speech. Who does? The people with guns. And they tell you what to do.
Yeah.
And then you have violence that is enforced to get people to follow a doctrine that they may or may not believe in.
So, is that true? Is Canada really being taken over by communists? Is Justin Trudeau a communist? And is the Trudeau government involved in a communist takeover of Canada? Well, let's begin by asking the question, what is communism? What is socialism? And this is already a non-trivial question. Today, the terms socialism and communism are generally held by socialists and communists to have distinct meanings. This wasn't always the case. Marx used the terms interchangeably, and historically, communism and socialism were the same thing. Now people are saying communism is sort of the end stage, the classless, utopian, egalitarian society, whereas socialism is an intermediary stage where the state seizes control of the means of production and tries to usher in the communist utopia. So, I think there is a large element of truth to this idea that there is a communist or socialist takeover in Canada, and in a very real sense of the word, a real sense, the 20th century has been a long and slow, gradual slide from laissez-faire capitalism towards socialism. We've seen the inexorable growth of the state and the nationalization of key industries, of infrastructure, of education, of healthcare, of telecommunications, sort of the real backbone of the modern economy. We've seen the rise and proliferation of the welfare state. And that's another definition of socialism is welfarism, is the welfare state. And that's a contentious argument, but it's a historical fact, is that things like the welfare state, like socialized medicine, unemployment insurance, and all the rest of it, the child tax care credit, are which isn't really a tax credit, by the way. It's a subsidy It can be a tax credit, but it's really more of a subsidy, or it, it can be a subsidy for lower income individuals. So that historically has been described as socialism. If you want, you can label it interventionism or welfare statism, I guess. But it really is socialism. If we think of so what is socialism? Socialism is social ownership of the means of production, and historically, the way this is manifested, and the way that this has always been conceptualized and viewed, was state ownership of the means of production. For example, my grandfather was a hardcore state socialist, Polish emigre, and this is a very popular viewpoint at sort of like the early 20th century and continuing on. Capitalism, liberalism, in the classical sense, was very much seen as outdated, and socialism was the modern scientific ideology that was going to usher in a new age of prosperity and egalitarianism. Now, if we look at the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto, and I've got them right here, courtesy of Marxist.org. Let's go through these one by one. Abolition of property and land, and application of all rents of land to public purposes. Well, really, that has occurred. Virtually most of the land in Canada is crown land. It's owned by the state. It's owned by the province or the federal government or the Queen or the King. If you own land, you must still pay rent for public purposes. That rent is called property tax. If you don't pay it, they're going to confiscate the land. So, do you own it, or are you really just renting it and paying a hefty price to do so? Number 2, a heavy progressive or graduated income tax. No argument there. Number 3, abolition of all rights of inheritance. Okay, number 3, they haven't gotten around to yet. They're trying. I know the NDP want to tax in the inheritance. That one still they haven't gotten. Number 4, confiscation of the property of all emigrants and rebels. Well, they don't confiscate the property of emigrants. That is, people leaving the Canada. And we don't really have any rebels. So this one, I guess no or non applicable. Centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank, like the Bank of Canada, with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. So that has occurred. There's a monopoly on banknotes exercised by the Bank of Canada, centralization of credit in the hands of the state with the Bank of Canada, centralization of the means of communication and transport in the hands of the state. So this is yes and no. The state does, well, there's the state does regulate and control quite heavily communication, telecommunication. A lot of that is done through private or ostensibly private firms, like your cell phone companies. But the state does still, they've got their sort of hands pulling the strings a little bit there. And the means of transport, well, there's certainly all infrastructure is state owned, state ran. A lot of airports via rail. That's a means of transport. So this is sort of a yes or no. Extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state. That's a no. The bringing into cultivation of wastelands and the improvement of soil generally in accordance with a common plan. I would say that's a yes. Equal liability of all to work. No. Establishment of industrial armies. No. Although that was tried by Justin Trudeau with he wanted to have $1 billion program to employ youths, sole sourced program that it was with the charity. So that could be considered an industrial army. I mean, that's what he's talking about is the state organizing work on a large scale. Combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries. Gradual abolition of all the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of the populace over the country. Well, there's certainly efforts to do that. They all the time they're trying to get doctors up, giving them like 60,000 to go to rural areas. There's a lot of subsidies for less populated northern areas, and there's sort of qualifies. Number 10, free education of all children in public schools. Yeah. Abolition of children's factory labor in its present form. Double check. Combination of education with industrial production. This is actually something they should probably do more of, like co-op education. But that goes on. Definitely goes on. So, as you can see, just looking at the Communist Manifesto, this is well underway in Canada. And, a lot of people have criticized and ridiculed Joe Rogan for saying that this is going on. But if you look at the Communist Manifesto, you look at Karl Marx's game plan for establishing a communist society, they've been at this for quite a long time. And they're winning. They're succeeding. They're getting closer and closer. So you tell me what's going on. If this is not a communist takeover, why have so many planks of the Communist Manifesto been implemented in Canada? Answer me that question. So I think that there is a large element of truth to what Joe Rogan said. Now, I don't agree that Trudeau is sort of like a uniquely communist menace. I think the whole political establishment in Canada, on the left and the so-called right, by the way, are part of a Fabian socialist plot to turn our country into a socialist hellhole. I don't think that Trudeau is like a secret Marxist or something like that. He's more like a useful idiot of the Marxist cause. So what happened was, at some point in the 20th century, Marxists realized that revolutionary communism was not being successful, because that was their original plan: armed revolutionary struggle, overthrow the capitalist class, the working class to join them and establish communism or socialism in that way. But the Fabian socialist strategy was to use the ballot box, to use democracy, and instead of a dramatic revolution completely changing the way things are done, they would slowly nationalize various sectors of the economy until you get to a command economy that way. And it's sort of like the boiling frog theory, where if you throw a frog in boiling water, it jumps right out. But if you put it in cold water and then slowly boil it, it'll just stay there because the change from day to day is so minuscule from minute to minute. So that's basically what's been going on. Recently, we've seen the push to nationalize pharmacare, or to have the government start picking up the tab for prescription medicine. And there's a dental program underway. So that's the Fabian socialist strategy, is to sort of work towards socialism in all these different industries and achieve victory in that manner. Socialists have a ton of political power in Canada. There's a lot of socialists, social democrats, people that identify with the left, the far left, and are really opponents of free enterprise, of capitalism, of really the Western way of life, and our traditional value system. Politicians routinely attack the profit motive, they impugn it, and there's very few politicians, if any, really, within the establishment that advocate for laissez-faire or for free markets or for unbridled capitalism. They pretty much all demand interventionism and welfareism and oppose having a free society and a free enterprise society. And so you could say, well, we don't have socialism, we have interventionism. We have capitalism with a safety net. We have interventionism. But the thing is that interventionism is unstable. This was something that Ludwig von Mises pointed out. And a perfect example of that, which is going on now, is the zoning regulations. So these people have been advocating for, these people being homeowners, have been advocating for zoning regulations that only allow single-family homes to be created. And the result, of course, is urban sprawl, but it's also a dire shortage of housing. And that's why the average rent now is over $2,000 a month, which that's not affordable on minimum wage. A lot of like just renting a room is like $1,000 in a lot of places, which is insane. You know, there's no way wages have gone up nearly as much, especially for lower income people on the bottom. You know, and the price of food has been skyrocketing as well. So, but that's an example. So they set up this intervention in the economy. They say, okay, well, These people only want single-family homes, so no problem. We'll pass that rule, and your property values will go up. You guys will be happy. You won't have as much traffic or as many people in the neighborhood. You can keep out the riffraff, keep out the apartment dwellers, these lowly apartment dwellers, because there's a pretty big barrier of entry to owning your home. You need sizable down payment, you need good credit history. So it really is a way of keeping out the undesirables, and sort of rigging the game in favor of the traditional Canadian family, or people with two incomes and a lot of wealth, rich people, or people that come from a comfortable background that have inherited some money or some property. Whereas, the rest of us, the scrubs, we just want to rent a room in a 3-bedroom apartment, for $500 or whatever that we can afford on our measly little salaries, or even a little studio, Or another example of the unintended consequences of intervention in the economy and how it can lead to more intervention is the minimum wage. Recently, the minimum wage has been hiked and hiked and hiked and hiked across Canada. Ontario, it's now like $17 an hour. BC, it's a little lower out in Atlantic Canada. But politicians intervene. They set a minimum wage. They say, we don't want people being exploited, taken advantage of. We want to make sure workers have more money, spend more money. But the reality is that the minimum wage doesn't actually raise anybody's wages. And this is a non-intuitive point. And even a lot of critics of the minimum wage accept that it raises wages in their arguments. They say, oh, it raises wages, but it causes inflation. Small businesses can't afford it, or whatever. But that's not really true, because the minimum wage doesn't raise wages. What it does is it's purely prohibitory. It just prevents employers from hiring low-skilled workers at a rate that is equal to their marginal revenue value product, or how much they contribute to the productive process. So they set the minimum wage, the price control, they intervene, and then you get massive unemployment. So then they intervene again, maybe they lower the interest rate, or maybe they engage in a works program, and then there's a lot of problems with that too. Like if the government is paying half your salary to a company to hire you, that's sort of an unfair advantage to other companies that have to pay the whole of their employees' salary, or the government prints money in order to finance the deficit, prices increase, and so the government imposes price controls, or wants to impose price controls. That's what Jagmeet Singh of the NDP has been advocating for, price controls on essential goods, not realizing that's if you set the price control above the market clearing rate, you're just going to end up with shortages. So another thing to look at is the Canadian system of public health care, of socialized medicine. What we have is, it's really socialized medical insurance. The government foots the bill for all these different procedures, and they set the price for all of them. And then physicians are sort of private, but they're all getting paid by the government. So it's really a public system. But the Canadian healthcare system is unique because out of pretty much all the countries in the world, except like Cuba, you can have private health care. But Canada, you can't. The regulations basically prevent it from happening. There's very strict regulations on private health care when it comes to things like a physician visit. Now, if you include in the definition of health care eyewear or dental or these things, that is private. That's like almost entirely private. But when it comes to like being seen by a doctor, going to the hospital, all of that is like 99% of that is public because the regulations really stifle any sort of market in healthcare. Yeah, basically, in summation, I think that Joe Rogan is correct that there is a communist takeover by Canada. No, it's not uniquely the Trudeau government. It's been going on for a while. Will continue for quite some time as well. But I don't think that people should just crudely dismiss him on this point. I think if you look at the totality of the evidence, the really only conclusion you could draw is that Canada is transitioning away from capitalism and laissez-capitalism into socialism, albeit by a very slow route through interventionism. But today we're seeing a lot of the inherent contradictions in government intervention in the economy, the results that are achieved, and hopefully we can learn from that, and we can put an end to this transitioning from capitalism to communism, and get our act together, embrace free markets, embrace freedom, embrace capitalism, and reject any sort of welfarism or socialism or interventionism, and just try freedom.